Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 270, Jockey Jack. Acknowledgment to Marion Taylor of the Albury History Group for the work she's done that was the basis of my episode. Jockey Jack was a woman named May McDonald. Where and when May McDonald was born is uncertain, but based on her death certificate, it was in 1879. She once said she was born in Melbourne. Another time she said on the water. There were so many May McDonalds born in Victoria in the 1880s, it's unsure which one was Jockey Jack. She always maintained her mother died when she was 3 and that her father was killed in a mine accident in Bendigo. She said farm families raised her, and then she claimed that she'd been ill-treated and whipped by a family near Horsham. She also said she lived at Druin in Gippsland. So there are quite a few myths that have grown around Jockey Jack, mainly because she was a little bit of a fibber when it came to her origins, and she often omitted or changed information. Somehow she became a jockey and she passed herself off as a boy, hence the name Jockey Jack. The first record that could be her was on the 23rd of September 1903, which is when she would have been 24, at Herbert in Queensland in the Wild River Times. And it talks about the troupe of Kemp's buckjumpers, equestrian performers that opened a short season in Herberton. It mentions the only lady buckjumper rider in Australia, Miss Marigold, performs in the ring. It says she will ride without a bridle any buckjumper brought in. Then still up at Herberton, but on the 15th of June 1904, it mentions how Miss Marigold is the magnetic wonder. And then in December 1904 in Charters Towers, Queensland, still with Kemp's buckjumping show, Miss Marigold in wonderful magnetic feats. On the 23rd of December 1904 in the Charters Towers Northern Minor, talks about Professor Kemp's opening at the old circus grounds, and the two gentlemen were considerably surprised when their attempts to lift Madame Marigold, a muscular lady of 8 stone, failed, and her unusual strength was further manifested in a human bridge act on which she supported 2 men, each with 11 stone weight. She's still up with Kemp's buckjumping show on the 28th of December 1904 in Queensland. This was the last mention of her as Miss Marigold. In a later court case in 1915, it says that at the age of 17 in 1904, she had a failure in life. She encountered a deceiver and was going down the road to destruction. Does this mean that she had a child? There was mention in the 1915 court case that she needed money to go and find my child. However, in 1904, if it was in fact when she was 17, this would have made her a lot younger than what other records indicate. So this would have meant she was born in 1887, not 1879, making her 8 years younger. It seems that she may have travelled and performed with Barton Brothers Circus around this time. On the 28th of November 1906 in Stanley, Tasmania, it says, one of the lady performers, Miss Montgomery, attached to Barton's circus, met with a painful accident at Smithton. While doing her turn, the horse she was riding fell on her right leg, being severely crushed beneath the fallen animal. Miss Montgomery was brought to Stanley on Tuesday for medical aid, and it will be some time before she will be able to resume her occupation. And then on the 8th of December 1906 in the Northwestern Advocate and Emu Bay Times, it is probable that Miss May McDonald, the lady rider, will reappear in the ring in Burnie tonight after her illness at Stanley resulting from a fall during a recent performance. The management have been advised that she's recovered sufficiently to rejoin the circus. So it's the first time that we actually see her named. So clearly May McDonald was given the stage name of Miss Montgomery, and I suggest she was also given the name of Miss Marigold while she was with Kemp's buckjumping show. On the 15th of January 1907 in the Launceston Daily Telegraph, Captain F.J. Barton, circus proprietor, placed a notice in the paper. I, the undersigned, notify the public that Miss May McDonald was last connected with Barton Brothers Circus at Smithton on the 25th of November and that she is no longer connected with the show. Miss McDonald did not meet with an accident in the circus.
However, a week later, in the Launceston Examiner, an action settled. A claim for £8, 10 shillings wages due was called on at the police court yesterday morning, the plaintiff being May McDonald and Frank Barton, proprietor of Barton's Circus. There was no appearance of either party. Mr. Gee, who was acting for the plaintiff, applied for the case to be withdrawn as it had been amicably settled. The application was granted. And interestingly, 3 days later, in the Hobart Clipper, Miss May McDonald, Captain Barton's Lady Rough Rider, who met with a nasty accident at Stanley a while ago, has now recovered and is on the program for the Hobart season, commencing next week. So they clearly settled their differences. On the 11th of February 1907, in the Launceston Examiner, Barton's Circus. Captain Frank Barton of Barton's Circus, a new circus, is busy in the city making arrangements for his combination to open on Wednesday night. The troupe is now completing a very successful season on the East Coast and has earned a good reputation. Captain Barton is not slow to realise that a good show is appreciated in Tasmania, and after having a successful tour with a smaller organisation last year, has ventured back with a much stronger circus. And featured is Miss May Mac, Lady Rough Rider, late of Kemp's famous troupe of Rough Riders. So she's been renamed again, no doubt because she's gone back up to Launceston where that case was heard. And the next day there was a report on Barton's Circus with its opening of the Launceston season tomorrow night, and it mentions Miss May Mac, the Lady Rough Rider, illustrates the fact that a female can show an extraordinary prowess with dangerous horses. She's the only successful Lady Rough Rider in the Southern Hemisphere. And another article says included in the troupe of performance is Miss May Mac, the only lady buckjump rider of Australia-Asia who appears under special engagement. And then after the first show, it reports that Miss May Mac, a lady buckjump rider, contributed a good item to the program. She gave a splendid exhibition on a notorious outlaw from the Midlands. The animal was a terrific bucker and made some hair-raising twists and curls in midair. He gave 3 successive bucks that were indescribable so soon as his rider made weight on the saddle, but Miss Mac completely mastered the animal and after a brilliant display sprang out of the saddle amidst much applause. Miss Mac will give another exhibition tonight on Skyscraper, who's reported to be the hardest horse on Australian soil to conquer. And on the 18th of February 1907 in the Launceston Daily Telegraph, Barton Brothers Circus had another appreciative audience on Saturday night. A special feature of the performance was the rough riding by Miss May Mac. After a little difficulty to reach the further stirrup, she sprang into the saddle and got set as the horse made its first leap. The outlaw Skyscraper made some terrific curls and twists in midair, but Miss Mac easily held her own. A well-known Victorian horse owner commented that he'd never seen a horse that bucked so terrific. Miss May Mac again demonstrated her abilities as a rough rider, and her display was a fine exhibition. Interestingly, on the 27th of February 1907, while they're still in Launceston, Mr. Frank Barton said that, just a line to let you know that we're nearing the end of our Tasmanian tour and purpose making our descent on Sydney and adjacencies at an early date. We've had a very fine season over here, and he lists the troupe, and Miss May Mac, coined as an American lady rough rider, he says easily claims the championship. Her mounts here were some of the worst, but she won without any trouble. And on the 18th of April 1907, in the Zeehan and Dundas Herald of Tasmania, Barton's Circus tonight, Miss May McDonald, the only lady buckjumper rider in the world. £10 to anyone who can produce a horse that can throw May McDonald. Miss May McDonald is a Western States lady of the cowboy class who is prepared to forfeit any sum of money to any person producing an outlaw horse that she cannot ride. Then on the 10th of June 1907, they're still in Tasmania, but they're down at Formby, and the Northwest Post says Barton's Circus. This combination returned to Victoria by the SS Flora on Saturday and will immediately enter on a New South Wales and Queensland tour. It is the intention of Mr. Barton to turn out the hurdle races Milroy and Rabato for a 12-month spell at Deniliquin. So on the 28th of September 1907 in the Newcastle Morning Herald and Mining Advocate, it seems that May has moved on and now she's with Martini's buckjumping show. So there was an advertisement on the 28th of September 1907 in the Newcastle Morning Herald and Miners Advocate for Martini's buckjumping show, and it does mention a Miss Farron of Albury who's versing a Singleton mare side saddle. So I'm not sure whether this is her, but it's interesting. We do know that she based herself in Albury, so that's a little bit of a question mark. What, however, is definite is 3 years later, in February 1910, she's performing with the Verto Company, that is Percy Verto, the conjurer. And along with the Conjuring Act, it seems that Percy also showed moving pictures, including the 1903 Melbourne Cup. It was known as Verto's Biotint and Novelty Company. It was also known as Verto's Biotint and Novelty Entertainers, Verto's Pictures and Entertainers, Verto's Electric Biotint and Lyceum Pictures and Singers, Verto's Pictures and Concert Company, or Verto's Moving Pictures. It was actually established in early 1905, not long after Percy and Millie Verto left the Mutoscope Vaudeville Company, and it initially featured Verto as a magician or handcuff king and his wife as the vision singer, Madame Verto. They included performers numbering from 5 to 9, including a pianist, and they almost exclusively toured through regional New South Wales and Queensland for 7 years. Then the Vertos closed down the tours and they settled temporarily to Cairns, where they ran Verto's Pictures. The couple later built the Lyric Theatre in 1912. As part of their lineup was the Beautiful Iris Act. This was typically billed as the Beautiful Iris, which was an act that had been described as a transformation cloak trick and as pose plastiques, which is believed to have involved projecting images onto her costumes. There is a little confusion over the identity of the performer. Iris Meredith was initially named as performing this, but then May, as May Mac, reinventing herself again and living on her wits, seems to have converted to a conjurer's assistant. In one ad, it says Verto's Biotint and Variety Company at the School of the Arts in Casino in Queensland, introducing the latest pictures, and then it mentions Miss May Mac, the beautiful Iris, in her pose plastique, the admiration of the bodies. On the 8th of February 1910, in the Richmond River Express and Casino Kyogle Advertiser in New South Wales, Mr. Percy Verto will arrive Tuesday and place before the Casinoites a magnificent program formed from the star artists of various cities. The public of Lismore greeted this company with bumper houses for 3 nights last week, and Miss May Mac, the beautiful Iris, was listed as part of the show. And it says Miss May Mac, a charming young lady, makes her first appearance in the sensational pose plastique of beautiful Iris. Then on the 12th of March 1910, they've moved on to Byron Bay in New South Wales, and it says that Miss May Mac has become the theme of conversation in her pose plastique of beautiful Iris. Miss May Mac is a real golden opinion winner everywhere. On the 11th of June 1910, in the Barcaldine Queensland newspaper, Verto always brings a good biotint cinema to Barcaldine, and a very nice crowd rolled up to welcome him on Tuesday evening. Mr. Selk was a capable pianist and was assisted by Miss May Mac, who also took part in the beautiful Japanese Iris, a series of lovely coloured flowers and designs, and an exhibition of flags of all nations. There is no mention of her being connected to the Verto Company after June 1910. She claimed in later stories that she actually converted to working as a shearer's rouseabout at Hay, New South Wales, and at this time became engaged to a jockey, Tommy Halligan. Thomas Michael Halligan was born in Hotham, Victoria in 1877, so would have been 2 years older than May. The only mention that I can find in newspapers is that he enlisted in World War I as Lance Corporal Tom Halligan, the well-known Western District sport. He piloted Aquarius to victory in the VRC Grand National Hurdle Race in 1900. So clearly the engagement didn't continue into a marriage, as in 1907, Tommy Halligan married Eliza Johnson, known as Lila. May explained that she got her nickname Jockey Jack while working at the atGreg station on the Upper Murray. The son of the station owner's name was Jack, so the family dubbed her Jockey Jack because she rode just as well as him. And there is a mention of a family at atGreg station in 1892, where it says that James Pearce, on the 14th of April 1892, at Killarney House, atGreg station on the Upper Murray, second son of John Pearce Sr., aged 28 years, of consumption or tuberculosis. So maybe that story does ring true. So it seems from her time on atGreg station that she became a jockey. When she signed up as a jockey for country race meets, she didn't divulge that she was a woman. She had a fall at the Warrnambool races and she had to be taken into the jockey's room to be examined, and that's when it was discovered that she was in fact a woman. She'd ridden races across Victoria before that, but also long after that, and it became accepted that she was a woman riding in these country races. One journalist even dubbed her as the woman from Snowy River. May actually went to jail for theft twice, the first in 1910 and then another time in 1915. The Albury Border Morning Mail and Riverina Times on the 28th of December 1910 outlines the case. May McDonald as a man, jockey and horsebreaker for 12 months. At the Corryong Police Court, Jack McDonald was charged by Constable Higgins with larceny of a double bridle and a green hide halter and was sentenced to 3 months imprisonment. Jack now turns out to be May McDonald, and she's been impersonating the character of a man for over a year and has been following the occupation of training and breaking in horses. In male attire, she passed through Wangaratta today on her way to Beechworth. She did not appear to be very much concerned or embarrassed and stated to an interviewer that she was fond of horses and preferred the occupation she was following as an easy way of making a living. She was recognised here as Jockey Jack, who used to work horses for Mr. Roland Hughes of Greta and was well known on the Moyhue and Greta racecourses as a jockey. When she was questioned today why she adopted male attire, she pertinently answered that she was as good as any man and that there were plenty of men who, if dressed in female attire, would make better women than men. So she appeared in court in masculine garb. She had a neatly fitted suit and a lounge hat, and she frequently burst into tears during the proceedings. She was sent by train to Wodonga, then by train to Wangaratta, where the locals did recognise her as May, and then another train took her to Beechworth. And on the 14th of January 1911, it says, Jockey Jack, a woman's been discovered in Beechworth jail, masquerading in man's clothes. She'd been sent to jail for stealing a bridle and a halter, and has been passing as a man in the Upper Murray district and earning a living training horses, sometimes riding them, being a clever jockey, known as Jockey Jack. Within a month of her release, she gave a dazzling display of horsemanship at the Tallangatta races. On the 1st of January 1915, in the Chiltern and How Long Times and Ovens Register, a conspicuous-looking individual known officially to the police as a man-woman whose name is May McDonald but is more familiarly known as Jockey Jack, arrived at the Beechworth jail on Tuesday. McDonald was arrested at Mitta on a charge of larceny and remanded to Beechworth. She has come into prominence on previous occasions through her fondness for male attire. So on Tuesday the 12th of January 1915, the Chiltern and How Long Times and Ovens Register, a young woman named May McDonald, better known as Jockey Jack, from her addiction to male attire and her association with racehorses and stable work, was charged with having feloniously stolen and taken away the sum of £7 5 shillings. The accused appeared in court in masculine garb and frequently burst into tears during the proceedings. William Joseph Ward, a plumber of Albury, said, I know the accused. I remember on the 26th of December I was at the Mitta races on that day and stayed at the Laurel Hotel that night. I retired to bed and at 3 a.m. a man named McLennan occupied a bed in the same room. He was in bed before me. I had a conversation with him for half an hour before retiring. I know what money I had before going to bed. I had £7 and 8 shillings. I counted it out and then put that amount in my hip pocket in my trousers. I rolled up my trousers and placed them under my pillow before going to sleep. The next morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, I woke up. As soon as I got up, I looked for my money and found it all gone except for 4 shillings. I heard nobody in my room during the night or morning. I made a search and informed the publican and police of my loss. The money I had in my purse comprised of 4 £1 notes in one compartment, 3 notes in another, and loose silver that was also in a compartment by itself. The purse produced is mine, and I never gave the accused or any person authority to take any of my money. Constable Johnson, stationed at Mitta deposed that at 10 a.m. on the 27th of December there was a report that a man had been robbed £7 4 shillings during the previous night. At 3 p.m. on the same day, I was driving along the road near the Bullhead Hotel. I saw the accused in front of the hotel. When I got within 100 yards of the hotel, I saw the accused making off to the back of the hotel. I got out of the buggy and followed her. I met her as she was returning to the hotel. In answer to my question, she stated she had gone to the back for private purposes. After further questions, she told me she had slept at the Laurel Hotel Mitta on the previous night. I asked her if she knew who had occupied the room next to hers, and she said yes, a man named Ward. I heard him talking in the room when he went to bed. I asked if she entered Ward's room and she replied, "Yes, I went in to wake him. I pulled the clothes off his shoulders and head and told him his horse was gone, but he made no reply." I asked her if that was the only time she entered Ward's room and she replied, "No, I was there half an hour later. I called him again but got no reply." I said, "Well, he reported to me that he was robbed last night." She asked, "Did he say I robbed him?" And I said, "No, he doesn't say so, but your movements appear suspicious." The accused said, "You can shoot me with your revolver if you like, but you'll be shooting an innocent person." Asking her what money she had on her, the accused replied, "Only these few shillings." At the same time, taking from her pocket 4 shillings, a threepenny piece, and 3 coppers. She reported that was all the money she had, and I said to her, "You're a woman. I won't search you, but I intend to have you searched." Then told her that if she knew anything about the matter, she'd better tell me. The accused commenced to cry and said, "I did take his money." She said further, "When I went into the room, his pants fell on the floor and I heard the money rattle. I wanted the money badly to go and find my child, and I could not resist the temptation." The accused subsequently gave me £2 and persisted in saying that it was all she had got. I arrested her. After being locked up, the accused made a statement which was written and signed by her. The accused was searched and no more money was found on her. The accused said she only took £2 5 shillings. Mr. Wilkinson made a moving appeal for leniency towards this unfortunate woman whose history was a sad one. She had undoubtedly succumbed to a sudden temptation, but for her own admission the police would have been unable to prove the charge against the accused. But for the face of prior conviction some 4 years ago, he would have had confidence in asking the bench to treat the accused as a first offender. The accused admitted a prior conviction at Corryong in 1910 when 3 months' imprisonment was ordered. The magistrate said the bench could not overlook the prior conviction. Everything had been taken into consideration and the accused would be convicted and sentenced to 1 month's imprisonment in Beechworth Jail, and he ordered that the money found on the accused be returned. So this is the only mention anywhere that May McDonald had a baby. Did she say that she had a baby to see whether she would be dealt with leniently in the court when it in fact wasn't true? Well, it is possible. After much delving, I cannot find a child born to May McDonald in Victoria or New South Wales. After this jail time, she came to live in Albury and she was a horsebreaker and a trainer. Little notice was taken of her until 1916 when the police superintendent William Childs called her in and demanded that she started to dress like a lady. Jockey Jack refused and she received widespread publicity that made the superintendent look like a fool. He was no fool though. As a detective, he had introduced the fingerprint system into New South Wales in 1903 and he became the state's chief commissioner from 1930 to 1935. He told her there'd been complaints about her wearing men's clothes, including a waistcoat and a watch chain. She claimed he offered to get her a job in Sydney so she could leave Albury. Jockey Jack said she wasn't going anywhere. She would not change her clothes as they were part of her life of looking after horses, and nothing came of the police action. On the 15th of June 1916 in the Corryong Courier, the somewhat romantic career of a local resident has recently been revealed, the heroine of the story being a young woman named May McDonald, who under the sobriquet of Jockey Jack has become familiar to many Alburyites by the reason of her love for horses and greyhounds. Many local people have known of the masquerade of the young woman for years, and it came a great surprise for them to learn that the police action that's been instigated with a view of compelling her to don women's apparel again. A representative of the Border Morning Mail, upon being made acquainted of the official action, sought an interview with Jockey Jack, to whom she told a story of an orphan's life of misfortune, coupled with a determination to succeed, even at the cost of much strenuous battling in the guise of a boy. In the course of an interesting interview, Jockey Jack said that she was awarded this name when she was working on an Upper Murray station. There were 2 men named Jack engaged at the station, and seeing that she was riding a racehorse, she was called Jockey Jack to distinguish her from the other Jack. She added that she'd won a hurdle race at Toowong on a horse called Velox, which started at 10-1. She also stated she'd been left an orphan in Melbourne and that all her relatives were dead. When her mother died, she was reared in Horsham, and from the 7 years of age she was thrown on the world, and at 17 years she encountered a deceiver, and to hide her shame she resolved to take on boys' clothing and try a new life. "I can tell you it saved me," she said, "otherwise I might have led a bad life in Melbourne streets." I never had the slightest trouble all the time that I've been in Albury until Thursday when, upon returning exercising some greyhounds, I was informed by the Superintendent of Police, Mr. Childs, that he wished to see me. As a result, I was called at the Superintendent's office at about noon, and the Superintendent asked me, "What's your name?" And I replied, "The people call me Jockey Jack." "But what is your proper name?" And I replied, "May McDonald." Mr. Childs said, "Don't you think it is time you gave up wearing those clothes?" And I asked, "Why, sir?" And he answered, "I've had several complaints sent in about you wearing those clothes." I asked from whom he'd received the complaints, but he refused to tell me. He then said, "There are complaints and you are hurting the feelings of people in Albury," and asked me to change my men's clothes and take a situation. I replied, "It is impossible to take me out of these clothes as this life suits me. I am born a natural sport and training and breaking in horses is my life. I've been brought up with these pursuits from a child and I'm passionately fond of the lot. To take me away from my animals that I so dearly love will mean death to me." "Why death?" asked the Superintendent. Because I replied, I had a failure in life at an early age of 17 and could see myself going along the road to destruction. So I decided to make a turn in life and took up sporting because I loved it. That was a terrible blow to me. "Why?" he asked. Because I answered it would mean I must leave the horses and animals that I'm so wrapped up in. He then asked, "Why stay here? Why not go away from here? Why not go boundary riding or get a job on a station?" I replied, "I'm tired of that life, sir. I've had a go at that. I was on the Upper Murray for 6 years and thought I'd like to come to Albury to see a little more of life." He then asked if he got me a situation in Sydney, would I go into women's clothing, but I told him I could not do that as it would be hard on me. He then asked me to consider the position and let him know whether I would take off the clothes and put on women's clothes. The Superintendent also asked, "Why not go away from Albury? Why stay here?" I replied, "What am I going to do with the horses? I am training them for people on the Upper Murray." The Superintendent then complained to me that I was in the habit of going to coursing matches with greyhounds. He said it was a bad place for me as bad language was often used there. I denied the bad language and told the Superintendent that there were many well-known businessmen in Albury connected with that sport and there was nothing to complain of in their conduct towards me. They always treated me with the utmost respect. I also told him that I always kept good company. The Superintendent then asked what company. I mentioned the name of a solicitor who acted as a judge at coursing meetings. This gentleman was most emphatic in insisting that no bad language was to be used on the ground under a penalty of a fine by the club. Finally, the Superintendent said, "Well, that's all I can do for you. Think it over." Jockey Jack is now 29 years of age and declares she will not again don woman's clothing if it costs her her life. And on the 8th of July 1916, in the Perth Truth in Western Australia, over east, under the name of Jockey Jack, May McDonald has for the past 12 years masqueraded as a man. For over 2 years, Jockey Jack has been a well-known character in the border town of Albury, where she's exhibited considerable skill in handling horses and greyhounds. For some reason not stated, the Albury police recently felt the spirit move them to insist that Jockey Jack don garments of the gentler sex. To this, Jockey Jack strongly objects, and it's understood as being given more than 1 month's grace in which to break herself into the thraldom of petticoats, the alternative being to leave the state or face the music. As Jockey Jack vows that she will not discard her male attire, nor leave the state, developments are awaited. It appears that many years ago, May won a race and was at once called Jockey Jack by her friends. Since her sojourn in Albury, Jockey Jack has earned a comfortable living on training horses and coursing dogs and is also an expert at clipping horses. The paper states general surprise expressed at the action taken by the police. It does seem strange in these days of women's emancipation and women's rights that a mere man should butt in against dress reform and sensibly favoured by May McDonald. And then on the 8th of September 1916 in the Chiltern Federal Standard, "I don't know why newspaper people should have a desire to write me up," she said to a reporter on Saturday. "I wear these clothes, a typical Riverina stockman's attire of slouch hat, leggings and all, not for notoriety, but because it suits me. I've just finished clipping a horse, 11 bob I got for that job, and that's why I dress like this, because I'm a horseman." Jockey Jack talks like a man, dresses like a man, earns her living in a man's work, in the sternest sense of the term, and her whole demeanour is masculine. As she was speaking, she mechanically raised her hat to a lady friend who passed by. Jockey Jack is a good unionist, and no wonder. She's had a hard life of it. She can tell a story of child slavery in a Victorian farming district. She knows the necessity that existed for an orphans' union a few years ago. I was born on the water. I don't exactly know how many years ago. I arrived in Melbourne with my mother, who died when I was 2 years old. I know nothing about my father, and as far as I know, I have no relatives in this country. I suppose I have some in the old country. I was reared in a home, and when 6 or 7 was working on a farm in the Horsham district. I had to mind sheep on a hillside, and I remember that I was hammered by everyone who could catch me. Fortunately, I could run in those days. When I was 12, I ran away altogether. I was then in frocks, of course, and I walked 70 miles in 3 days. The people I cleared away from did not know whether I went north, south, east or west, and I've never seen them since. I struck a town, Swan Hill I think it was, and a Salvation Army officer took up a collection for me. I was then sent to a home in Melbourne, but I didn't stay there long. I was always wild. The city streets were no good to me, so I decided to go into the bush. The world is hard on a young woman who finds herself at the bottom of the hill, but I determined to get to the top again, and I decided to do the climb as a man. I have done it as I told the police some time ago when they wanted me to get out of these clothes. I told them straight that they could only get these clothes off me in the morgue. I believe a person can do anything he makes his mind to do, continued Jockey Jack. I've been in these clothes for 12 years or so. I've done all sorts of work. I've been a station hand, a boundary rider, a rouseabout and a shearing shed, a horse breaker, a rough rider and a groom. I've even driven a team of bullocks, but I did not last long at that. The language beat me, but I suppose I would have mastered that in time. Jockey Jack was 6 years in the famous Upper Murray country, where the horse's hoofs strike firelight from the flintstones every stride, and it was up there that she gained most of the experience which has helped to make her probably Australia's most remarkable horsewoman. She was for some time with Barton Brothers Circus and toured Tasmania, where she was nearly killed by a fall from a buckjumper, which kicked her as well. I was practically in the coffin. 3 doctors gave me up, but here I am. This is the life for me. I can earn a better living this way than I could at an ordinary woman's work. Housework does not agree with me. It would kill me in 6 months. And as I don't want to die, I'm going to stick to these clothes. In a nutshell, Jockey Jack's philosophy may be stated thus. The world is hard on anyone who falls, but it's harder on a woman than a man. Anyone who gets down should try to get up, and if man's clothes can be a ladder towards respectability, why should the law step in and try to knock that ladder away? On the 12th of January 1917, in the Gilgandra Weekly of New South Wales, at Chiltern Victoria races on New Year's Day, a pony trained by Jockey Jack won the Galloway Handicap, beating a good field. Jockey Jack is Miss May McDonald. Jockey Jack, she is known in Albury by no other name, has had for a girl a unique career. She earns her living at man's work and has been wearing masculine attire for 12 years. Miss McDonald has 2 racehorses at work in Albury. And on the 26th of February 1917 in the Glen Innes Examiner in New South Wales, Miss May McDonald, or Jockey Jack as she's known in the South, won a double with her horse Betty Brett at the Corrion Cup meeting. Miss McDonald has worn man's attire for 12 years, trains her own horses, and has 2 in work at Albury now. She trains the horse herself, and a pretty slick GG it is. So in September 1956, in this conversation with Ken Blair, she said she joined the army as a man in 1917 and led an Armistice Day parade in Albury on a horse ahead of 2 state governors. On the 28th of April 1918 in the Sydney Sun, it says, Miss May McDonald, better known as Jockey Jack of Albury, has made a patriotic offer to Captain Carmichael. She volunteers to fill the place of any young man from either of the New South Wales jockey clubs who will enlist in Carmichael's 1,000 and keep it for him until he returns. Miss McDonald is a horse trainer and jockey and has a good deal of experience in the country. So I'm wondering whether that information got a little mixed up when it was relayed in 1956. On the 3rd of May 1924 in the Melbourne Sun News Pictorial, one of the most remarkable characters in the Riverina, Jockey Jack, has just been admitted a member of the Albury Racing Club. Jockey Jack's real name is May McDonald. She discarded petticoats for male attire and made her appearance in somewhat sensational circumstances several years ago. She'd been masquerading as a man and in the discovery of her sex put some people against her. On the 21st of September 1918 in the Albury Border Morning Mail and Riverina Times, it says among the patients at the Albury District Hospital is Miss May McDonald, Jockey Jack, who's suffering from bronchitis. May trained horses under the name of J.J. McDonald and entered pony competitions in the Albury show. She usually took a pony for the children to ride. It was only when you saw the beauty of her hands that you realised she was a woman. She told Ken Blair in a 1956 interview that Albury's decent people treated her well. I've played a lone hand and I've been left that way. He talked about how he obtained the interview from May McDonald, and he said, I just knocked on the door of her house near the waterworks. She liked steak, and the fee was to take a piece of steak each time I spoke to her. May McDonald was a woman of amazing talent. She had guts and determination and followed her own path without caring what people thought of her. She was a consummate horsewoman who could ride the wildest buckjumpers and train successful racehorses. May died in Albury in August 1964 at the age of 85. That's based on her death certificate. She was buried in men's pyjamas. The Sydney papers actually recorded her age as 80. In 1916, she told the journalist she was 29, which would have made her birth year 1887 and her death age of 77. On searching births in that year in Victoria, there is an Elizabeth May McDonald that was born in Carlton to Marion Taylor, who was aged 19 with father unknown. There was a Marion McDonald living in Melbourne at that time who was well known to police for vagrancy and drunkenness offences. Was this Jockey Jack's mother? Jockey Jack said her mother died when she was 3 and she was sent to a home until she was 7. So I hope you enjoyed the interesting story of May McDonald.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.